coupon that you can use, the word course, to save $50. Normally these segments are $300 a piece plus shipping. Right now through the end of October 31st, you can save $50. And if you become a course student, you can attend the free monthly webinar classes such as these. Both segment 1 and segment 2 have free monthly classes. You can also ask us for a sample class, and we will send you an entire webinar class so that you can get an idea of exactly how these classes take place.
Just wanted to remind everybody out there, Kim, that you just enter, you actually apply that coupon code right when you check out on our pages on our website. So find that multimedia course page on the website. As you add it to your card and check out, then you'll find a box to apply that coupon. Just enter it as it reads there, and COURSE, capital COURSE, to get your $50 off.
All right, thank you, Leroy. And here is our future classes that we're having at EAN. Of course, you see tonight is the free Mercury Retrograde class. And we're going to be starting a class series on the modalities and the elements. As you can see them listed here, we'll pursue them through October, November, and December. And you can enroll in all 7 classes at once, so you only have to have one. You handle that part, Leroy.
Well, thank you.
You're much better at that.
In typical Mercury retrograde fashion, we made this a sequence of events. So there's actual 7 events, as you see, through December 10th with the modality series and then the elemental series. All 7 have been discounted to $105. That gets you involved just like tonight, live and in person with us, as well as the MP3 download link, the video link, and all the slides on the back end. But we made it a series, so you're going to have to enroll for all 7 at a discount of $15 a piece. They will become available on the website, however, after they are produced, but the price is $25 a piece on the website, and you get all that information again on the back end. But that won't be, the modality series will be available after November 3rd, and the elemental series will be available on the website after December 15th. So the best deal is to go ahead and join live, invest the $105. There's going to be a tremendous amount of information there for newer people to EA, as well as existing students. And of course, we have become known to be kind of the practicing or counseling astrologer in the world. So everybody is welcome, and there's going to be some very nice information presented for the next several months. So join us. Go to that webinar link on our homepage, drops down to educational webinar page. You'll find that item on the website. Also, before the end of the broadcast tonight, you'll be seeing something in your inbox from Media Monk as well. And you can actually get your enrollment link, your registration link for all 7 in this series immediately upon checkout through that Constant Contact newsletter that's going to hit your inbox before we finish tonight. So thank you for letting me clarify all that. Any questions, just email MediaMonk@evolutionaryastrology.net.
Or chat with him on the message board with this webinar. Now, I will say one more thing in regards to this series of 7 classes on modalities and elements. I thought I would add a little bit of mixture to going through the 12 archetypes. We take the circle, we divide it by the polarities of 2, the modalities of 3, and the elements of 4. And those 3 areas, polarities, modalities, elements, create the 12 archetypes. So we will go through the 12 archetypes, but I'm going to mix it up a little bit and do it a little differently. The polarities will be included all the way through the modalities and elements as well. Thank you, everyone, for letting us go through this housekeeping. And so here we are with our subject tonight, Mercury retrograde. First of all, a few slides on just planetary retrogrades in general. It is a geocentric or Earth-centered phenomena of apparent motion. It looks like the planets appear to slow down, stop, go backwards before they go forward again if you view it from here on planet Earth. Anytime we have a planetary retrograde, they are closer to the Earth than when they typically travel direct. So we feel it as more powerful through these retrogrades. What a planetary retrograde does is it causes a withdrawal from the status quo to redefine that planetary archetype according to our own individual natural law. So planetary retrogrades are non-static. It means there's a perpetual state of change and evolution, and they serve to accelerate the evolution of any planetary retrograde. So if you want to put planetary retrogrades into black, white, good, bad definitions, this is not the perspective of it from evolutionary astrology principles. Now these retrogrades are defined by whatever sign and house they fall in your chart. And anytime we have a planetary retrograde, you look to the opposite sign and house of that planetary retrograde for clarity, expression, objectivity, and always answers to retrograde lessons come from within ourself. That rebellion and stepping away from the status quo. Now, if you have a natal planet retrograde in your birth chart, that means that this is a lesson throughout your entire lifetime. Not buying into the status quo of communications, Mercury retrograde, love, Venus retrograde, etc. If we have a transiting planet retrograde, such as what we're discussing tonight with Mercury, it means we have individual and collective lessons going on with that archetype during the time period of its retrograde and including the shadows. If you're born with a natal planet retrograde and it goes retrograde by transit, there's a temporary harmony and balance. Example, some of you could be born with Mercury retrograde in your chart. Therefore, whenever Mercury goes retrograde by transit, it seems to be a little easier for you, a little clearer in your communications. Things are in that temporary harmony, while those of us who were born with Mercury direct may sometimes get out of sorts through the retrograde. And of course, if you were born with any of your planets getting ready to turn retrograde or direct, those are very powerful states because everything's at a standstill to throw it off retrograde or to move forward again direct. And you need to look at your ephemeris. Sometimes when you're looking at the circle chart, there will be an S there where you see the retrograde. And if you see an S, then that means it will be stationary, retrograde, or direct. If the planet is ahead of the sun, it's getting ready to go retrograde. If the planet is behind the sun, it would be getting ready to go direct. Here's some astronomy on Mercury. It takes Mercury 88 days to go around the sun. Because we are traveling along with Mercury around the sun, it appears as though Mercury takes a whole year because it goes retrograde 3 to 4 times per year. If we averaged out its mean daily motion, you would see it would be about 1.5 degrees. So again, that appearance to take a year through the zodiac. When Mercury stands still to turn retrograde or direct, it's called that stationary period. It's 1 day. But many of us will say, pay attention, the day before, the day of, and the day after Mercury turning retrograde and direct, because again, everything is so intensified. And as you can see from our with this visual that I have for you with planet Earth in blue, when we visually look at Mercury and the sun, Mercury never appears more than 29 degrees away from the sun. This is its elongation from our Earth-centered appearance. I have another slide, well, 2 more slides for you on a little bit on astronomy. I'm going to gloss over this one. Each of you attending this webinar will be able to have a PDF of all these slides, and you'll be able to print this slide out and look at it and study it if you want to. This is an old slide of Robert Blaschke, who's no longer with us. He had the Earthwork School of Astrology, which is where this came from. This is another visual on Mercury's retrograde and how it changes from morning star to evening star. This particular slide also works for Venus too when we have Venus retrogrades. Here's a little bit more of a visual that helps you understand it. We start with the lavender, and Mercury enters its pre-shadow. This is where it will be when it goes direct, and it continues through this first motion across the sky. Here's where it turns, the red dot turns retrograde. The red is going backwards and appearing to make the loop, and then it goes direct. And this very pale lavender pink is its post-shadow, and it reaches the point where it leaves its shadow where it first went retrograde and goes forward again. This is how it appears visually in the sky to us. Now, Mercury retrograde patterns. It so happens that Mercury's retrograde cycles reverse through the elements: water, air, earth, fire. And it spends 1 year in one element, and then the next year transitions from one element to the next. And that's what we have going on right now. All of our 2014 retrograde cycles start in water, and they reverse back into air. Next year, 2015, all of the Mercury retrogrades will be in air signs. And as you can see in 2016, it then goes from air to earth. A little bit on the Mercury archetypes. Mercury at this point currently rules 2 signs. Outer Mercury is the ruler of Gemini in the 3rd house. Here's that polarity, modality, and element. Active polarity, mutable modality, and the element of air. And so the outer archetype of Mercury is the conscious mind, left brain. So it is with Virgo. But with Mercury, this is how we, or excuse me, with Gemini 3rd house, this is how we want to apply facts, words, figures to our world. This is the language of communication in all its various types: speaking, writing. Mercury retrogrades rule movement, so they rule cars, but because of speaking and writing in these days, Mercury also rules computers as well, and your phones, and all those little electronic devices that we all like so much to make our world convenient. I also wrote down just a few words about Mercury. It's the debater, clever, versatile. Of course, we know the twins. That's that duality of Mercury. It's excitable. It's the trickster. It's adaptable, talkative, argumentative. This is not a complete list, but it gives you some idea of what the outer archetype of Mercury is like. The inner archetype of Mercury is its rulership of Virgo in the 6th house. Here it switches to passive, mutable earth. So Mercury stays within the mutable modality, but here it becomes energy moving back to the center, passive, and it takes on the element of earth. Still the conscious mind, still the left brain, but here it starts to analyze and reason, to self-reflect, to adapt, to self-improve. Any of you who are familiar with evolutionary astrology will recognize that we look at the archetype of Virgo 6th and Pisces 12th as the archetype of sadomasochism, the Garden of Eden myth where we separated spirit and flesh, or attempted to, the distortions of it. And what happens with that is we have created this imperfect human guilt compared to supposedly a perfect source. And so then we have guilt linked to atonement, which is the masochistic or victim side, and guilt linked to anger, which is the sadist or victor side. And this is where we get into those distortions of Virgo with criticism. This is where we get into all of the worry, the anxiety, the inability to have inner peace, because we are living our world based upon human-made understandings of perfection that are just really distortions from natural law. We're here on the path to perfect. Virgo in the 6th, through Mercury's rulership, is also where we learn service to another or society as we go from Leo to Virgo to Libra. Now, Mercury retrograde, its main archetype, its main purpose is to release excess thought, to release all the worn out mental patterns that no longer serve us. When Mercury is retrograde, it points us from our left brain, our analytical side, to our right brain, our intuitive side. And we know this through Mercury as the ruler of Gemini. Its polarity is Sagittarius with ruler Jupiter, which is the right brain and our intuition. Mercury as ruler of Virgo, its polarity is Pisces with ruler Neptune. And this is whole brain. And this is the last archetype of the zodiac, which is the deepest levels of intuition and connection to source energy we can find. So when Mercury's retrograde, that mutable quadrant is activated, the mutable modality. Mercury retrograde is about turning inward and quieting the mind, learning to think for ourselves, learning to trust our own intuition first, and then following through with the facts, not the other way around, which is how Mercury direct wants to operate. Again, Mercury's rulership at Gemini, we try to make 1 + 1 equal 2. And sometimes 1 + 1 = 3. The whole is greater than the parts that make it up. And so every time Mercury's retrograde, it allows us to deepen intuition. Mercury retrograde also, as many of you are probably familiar with, dealing with the details. Those of us who have been, I've been through 30 years of Mercury retrogrades as a student of astrology, and they never fail to entertain, let me say it that way. And you know that we sometimes get to do things more than once. We either were not meant to go forward the way we were trying to the first time, or there's something to integrate and learn through doing it more than once. And sometimes doing it more than once gives us that opportunity to release and let go, again, of all those outworn mental patterns. So Mercury retrograde allows us to gain clarity on what is the best course for us mentally. Speaking, writing, communicating, going through all of those details of our life. And sometimes Mercury retrograde is taking the time to do it correctly, to do it the best way. And I always have to give my sister-in-law credit for this. She's a bank manager, and she's always teaching the tellers who keep, something you need to clean up, and you just keep creating mess again and again and again. Well, take the time to clean the mess up the first time. Take it out, put it away, turn the light on, turn the light off. This is also one of the lessons of Mercury retrograde. Here are some of your highlights. Now, again, I always point out with these Mercury retrograde classes, your last 2 slides will be a listing of all of the Mercury retrograde aspects. So if you want to print out of those aspects to be working with them throughout the next couple of months, they'll all at the bottom. I'll show them to you at the end. But Mercury entered shadow September 14th. That's when it first hit 1646 Libra. As you can see, it goes retrograde on October 4th, which is coming up here right around the corner. I don't have my calendar in front of me, so I can't look to see if that's Saturday or Sunday. I think it's Sunday, but you know it's coming soon. Highlight of any planetary retrograde is its conjunction or opposition to the Sun. In Mercury's case, this is an interior conjunction. Mercury is between Earth and Sun. This is the aha point of the retrograde. You can see it comes at 23.5 degrees Libra. Then you have Mercury direct October 25th. Finally leaves its shadow November 10th. And then Mercury will overtake the Sun on the other side of the Sun December 8th. And you can see those dates right there. Excuse me just a second. I think that I need to sneeze. I'm going to take my headset off. All right, I'm going to have to train myself to hit my mute button. My old headset had a easy easy to mute button.
You do too, Kim, but you did well there. Thank you.
I know. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. I do have that little green bar up there to
Yeah,
mute,
and
don't
most
I?
people out there that are new to the webinar format will notice that little control panel with the orange arrow. Just you can expand or collapse that, but basically that little green mute button, if Kim does open up the board for questions, that is your mute button as well. So there's several controls we didn't go over here, but it's relatively simple. So I'll let you.
Yes, the orange arrow, you click on it, expand the panel, you click on it again and you collapse the panel. And when you expand it, you can see that there's a Q&A area and Leroy runs that board. And so if you have questions while I'm going along here, you're welcome to type something in. Leroy will answer best as he can. If he doesn't know an answer, he'll open it up to me. I'm going to try and get through this information, but we have a very active Mercury retrograde. If you if you take the semi-squares, sesqui-squadrates, the other aspects into consideration, we have a lot of Mercury detail here going on. I'll get into that in just a couple of slides. Mercury is in Libra 55 days. It will be in Scorpio 32 days. Typically, when Mercury's going full speed ahead, it's only in a sign of the zodiac about 12 to 14 days. So you can see we really slow it down when we have these retrogrades. And here are the dates that Mercury is in Libra, moves into Scorpio, retrogrades back into Libra until it goes direct and moves through Scorpio again. When we have a Mercury retrograde from Scorpio back to Libra, again, what we are doing is starting Mercury retrograde in the water element, the emotions, and we're going back into air, the mind, and the mental. So this year, all of the Mercury retrogrades start with emotional triggers or upsets that then lead us into mentally processing things differently so that we can release these old emotional and mental patterns. Now, with this Mercury retrograde starting at 2-3 degrees Scorpio, we can expect there to be some intense emotional triggers with regards to any area of our life that feels limited. Scorpio is the limitations of who we are versus who we are not. That is why we become attracted to something or someone outside of ourselves. These emotional triggers can come in the area of relationships and in the desire nature. In EA, the soul has a dual desire nature to separate from source, return to source. And so Mercury starting this retrograde in Scorpio brings us the opportunity to release old separating desires that no longer serve our soul. And will we replace it with another separating desire, or will we replace it with desire to know source energy? So one of the things that's necessary with this particular retrograde, probably all of them with water, starting in water this year, very important to breathe and calm ourselves down through the frustrations. Any of you who've been around Scorpio energy know that some of the traditional words is the volcanic eruption, the volcano, or the explosion, the earthquake. Scorpio is fixed water. And so we go along for so long until that pressure builds up and there has to be an emotional release. Mercury turning retrograde, early Scorpio, all of us will have these emotional releases coming to the surface. We also will be metamorphosing, that's a Scorpio word, old thought patterns. Mercury in Scorpio is a really good psychological detective. It can just break through barriers. It can break through all the Libra smiley faces and get down to the bottom of it. One of the things Jeffrey Green used to say is that Libra was related to feelings, which was their initial reaction to anything. And underneath the feelings are the emotions, and that's Scorpio. So again, Libra puts a smiley face on and says, I'm okay. You're not hurting me. And then 5 minutes later, somebody's having an emotional outburst because they are hurt. So again, feelings are initial reactions to something in your life, and the emotions are what's underneath those feelings. And that's a real good interlink between Libra Scorpio. So we're going to not only metamorphose old thought patterns, we're going to get insights and clarity into a lot of our deep emotions and the feelings on the surface covering them up. And that's all going to get exposed, and we're not going to be able to hide that anymore. Of course, every Mercury retrograde is learning to listen, but a Mercury retrograde back into Libra is really about learning to listen. I don't know where this quote came from, but I found that it was passed around Facebook and I copied it down. The biggest communication problem is that we do not listen to understand. We listen to reply. And so this particular Mercury retrograde, one of the best things we could do is make that attempt to really hear what another person is saying and do that good old relay it back. All right, this is what I think I heard you say, XYZ. Is that what you said? So this particular Mercury retrograde in relationship signs, we're going to be having multiple conversations with those in our life. And it's just being okay with it. I've already told you this once. Weren't you listening the first time? Why do I have to say it again? Because I didn't hear it the way you said it, or I wasn't listening, or somehow talking about it over again, I'm going to understand it on a deeper level than the first time around. Be okay with that. And as we are working with Scorpio-Libra here, these conversations, this listening, this communicating back and forth, it's going to evolve our relationship patterns and hopefully find deeper levels of trust, because Mercury in Scorpio has a razor sharp ability to sense lies. Somebody who's telling us what they think we want to hear rather than what they really mean. Mercury in Scorpio will also pick up on any betrayals of trust. And so as it goes retrograde here over this next 1 to 2 weeks in Scorpio, some of these things may be exposed. Our vulnerabilities may be exposed. The polarity of Scorpio is Taurus. And any betrayal of trust or any abandonment or any relationships that come to an end during this retrograde cycle or at any time leads to the need for deepening our Taurian self-reliance. Mercury retrograde is going to be pointing towards Taurian self-reliance through this cycle. The polarity of these Mercury retrogrades is Taurus to Aries. Opposite of Scorpio is Taurus, opposite of Libra is Aries. So we're going to look to Taurus and Aries for clarity about ourself. All those communications, all those details we're having to work with right now in our world, they're pointing us back to ourself, our self-reliance through Taurus, our self-identity through Aries. So we also must listen to ourself. What's the inner conversation going on in your own head? What are your own thoughts telling you? What are you recognizing about yourself? How are you changing? Are you reaching a deeper level of self-reliance? Is your self-identity coming through more and more clear? Or is it confused? If you are wondering, who am I? then this particular Mercury retrograde cycle will become very important to listening to yourself as much as you do someone else. We also are going to have to learn that whole balance between ourself and another. How do we balance it all? How do we balance that giving and receiving? How do we communicate about that? With Scorpio pointing back to Taurus, how do we balance resources, our own resources and those we share with others? Is there a fairness with resources in our lives, resources we share with others? Now, there are more things that I can touch upon. I just put a few slides out here in regards to Mercury retrograde in Scorpio-Libra. I've got a fair amount of slides with all of the aspects that are going through. And so if you're noticing any archetypes here with these 4 signs that I may not be touching upon, please feel free to type out a question to Leroy, what about XYZ? And I'll be happy to address it, and hopefully we'll get through all of them with the aspects. Let me just touch in with Leroy while I take a drink of water. Any questions for me from the board?
No, it's quiet right now. But again, there's 2 places to interact. There is a chat pane in your control panel out there, everyone. But the Q&A board is the right format to ask your question of Kim Marie. Questions pane.
Yeah, I think the chat is just for us organizers, isn't it? Mercury detail. So here's all of the aspects that Mercury retrograde will make this cycle. And every aspect is going to be 3 times except Venus. So if you're not looking at semi-squares, semi-sextiles, sesquisquadrates, you're missing a whole lot of Mercury's busybodiness through this retrograde cycle. We're going to go through each of these aspects one by one, and I'll try and give you some highlights for them and what we'll be working with through these Mercury aspects 3 times to each of these planets, except Venus. And again, you're going to have a list of all these that you'll have a PDF to refer to, so you don't have to be frantic with your Mercury detail unless you are a Gemini or a Virgo or have lots of planets in the 3rd or 6th house. Then it's okay to be writing everything down while I speak. I put a chart up here. Kim Marie's humor. I put a chart up here for the interior conjunction. It takes place October 16th, remember, at 23 degrees Libra, 24 minutes. That's when Mercury passes over the sun. It so happens it will be 2:40 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time, which is here in Rapid City, which is where Leroy and I reside. I always put a 0 Aries chart up so that you get the signs in their natural houses. These are all of those aspects that I just showed you, except for Uranus. I did put Uranus in, even though it's not going to have an opposition 3 times. Mercury did, where was that? Mercury did oppose Uranus September 13th at about 15.5 Libra, but I thought it's so close in orb, I put it in there. You see the kite? You see the blue grand trine with the fire signs going on here, and then we have the sextiles, Mercury to Mars and Jupiter. So Mercury's making a kite aspect in addition to its interaction with the nodal axis and the sesquisquadrates to Chiron and Neptune. So there's a little visual for you, and we'll go over each of these. The first one we're going to look at is the fact that Mercury will make a waning sextile to Mars. And how we look at it in the world of EA, you'd start with Mars, you'd go the directions that the planets move through the zodiac, and you have to go 300 degrees to get to Mercury, the waning sextile at 300 degrees. Here are the 3 dates that Mercury does it. Each time it makes this sextile, both Mercury and Mars are in different signs because Mars is moving forward again, full speed, coming off of its own retrograde in Libra, which we had March 1st through May 19th. And that retrograde was, let me see again, 27 and a half Libra back to 9 Libra was Mars retrograde. So Mercury's going to be making two different aspects to Mars. So it can almost feel like we might be revisiting some of the issues from the Mars retrograde. If there's any residual relationship issues, communication issues in relationships, anything that, again, any actions that were unfinished from the Mars retrograde, these are the triggers. Mercury many times is the trigger to bring something about with slower moving planets. So when we're looking at a waning sextile, what it's really about is to have considered actions, Mars, and communications, Mercury, with whatever the larger picture is that's presenting itself at the moment, be it a group, be it an intimate relationship, be it a co-worker, be it a friendship. These waning sextiles, it's really about deepening our ability to recognize the effects that our words and actions have upon others. So what is best for everybody concerned here? And because Mercury's retrograde in Libra, polarity Aries, it means including ourselves as well. But waning sextiles take place in the last quarter phase of the zodiac. And this is where we're trying to return to source in some way or see a larger picture. And so a sextile is a smoother aspect. So if we make the effort, we really can understand the effect that our words and actions will have upon others that we relate to. This would be taking place for each of us on a personal level. It'll be taking place on a global level, on a country level. In case any of you haven't been watching the news, they're having massive protest in Hong Kong because China's cracking down and not giving Hong Kong as much autonomy as they said they would. And it's called everybody's coming out on the streets with their umbrellas because the police are spraying all the tear gas. So they're calling it the umbrella revolution. And so there is a very large group of people that are saying to a larger group, Hong Kong to China, wait a minute, what gives you the right to control us? Back to the picture again, I'll go back and forth to this chart. Mercury also is making 3 waxing sextiles to Jupiter. And as you can see, again, we've got this grand trine in fire signs taking place here throughout the first half of October. Mercury making the 60-degree mark from Jupiter. Waxing sextiles. These are all going to take place in Leo Libra. And here, with the waxing sextile, our relationships will be communicating, sharing information that can trigger insecurities for us. Leo can be very insecure when it does not have a deeper level of self-love. And when that's the case and we are insecure, then Leo is always looking for fulfillment outside of itself. And so while the sextile is again a smoother, more harmonious aspect, that Leo to Libra could easily have us putting projections out there onto someone. Will you love me? Will you make me the center of your universe? And of course, partners could be doing the same thing. Well, I need you to make me the center of your universe. And if we're going back and forth in that way, we can trigger the insecurities even more. We can trigger all kinds of upsets. So what we want to be working towards here is listening and opening up to more equal giving and receiving. Mercury retrograde throwing us back to the Aries polarity. Who am I? Do I love myself? Do I love myself deeply enough that I can be open to the evolution of my relationships? Libra, relationships in general. Can I be open to feedback from others in regards to creativity? Jupiter and Leo, it's all about being noticed. It's all about being creative. It's all about expanding ourselves out there in the world. And Mercury retrograde is going to be having all the people in our world giving us feedback on ideas and what they think, and we're going to be wanting to do the same thing to everybody else. And so there's some unique opportunities here to really open up how we perceive our creativity needs to go forward. And the Mercury retrograde will point out ways in which our creativity is not working out, how we need to change something. If we are listening, we can get to this point where we actually will give to another as they need and desire, versus the distortion of imposing our needs and desires onto the relationship. I'm going to give you what I think you need. That's the distortion. The natural expression is, how can I give to you what you actually need and desire? And so a lot of this is going to be relating to that conditional versus unconditional love. And Jupiter and Leo can be very conditional if it's insecure. When we deepen that self-love, then Jupiter and Leo turns unconditional. It can still have healthy boundaries, but when Jupiter and Leo turns unconditional, then both parties will have their needs and desires met. So this Mercury retrograde is going to stir the pot up here with creativity, with fairness, with giving and receiving. But the waxing sextile is going to be opportunities to change it to new levels, better levels of fairness. How is this happening for you? How is it just presenting it? How is fairness presenting itself in your life as we're in the shadow of Mercury's retrograde? Here we are back to our happy little chart again. And we're going to look at the next aspect. I always take these aspects the way they first present themselves in the first passage. In other words, when Mercury's in its pre-shadow from 16 Libra to 3 Scorpio, how do these aspects come along? Boom, 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 1, 2, 3. And that's usually the order that I will talk about them. So Mercury, okay, is going to actually make the waning semi-square to Mars. Mercury is going to get far enough through into early Scorpio that it gets within 45 degrees of Mars. So we have two Mercury-Mars aspects going on. This is the waning semi-square. This is where Mercury is leaving last quarter and going into a balsamic phase in relationship to Mars. This is going to be the tougher of the Mars aspects. It'll still re-trigger any residual issues from the Mars retrograde in Libra. And same thing, both of these planets are moving so fast. Each of these waning semi-squares take place in different signs. But this is where we're going to see more upsets and triggers, because the waning sextile, we have that opportunity or potential to take others into consideration. With the waning 45-degree mark, it's more triggers and upsets, because we have to surrender to what is best for all concerned, and we may want to do it our way. Mercury retrograde in Libra, we're looking for balance. We don't necessarily have it. Mercury retrograde in Scorpio, we want the control, especially in our outer world. And we have to, again, go back to the Taurian self-reliance and the Arian self-identity to be whole within ourselves, so that we can then let go, change, surrender to whatever communications and actions are best for ourselves and those we are in relationship with. Another way that this particular aspect might operate through this retrograde cycle is a loss of meaning in our relationships, heading into the balsamic phase, the last 45 degrees of the circle. If we've been putting too much projection onto our relationships, if we have been making our partner a de facto god goddess, we could find this Mercury retrograde bringing on disappointment, disillusionment, loss of meaning. I don't know if I can go forward with this relationship anymore. So it's possible that these aspects may be bringing about the ending of a relationship. Definitely for all of us, it will be about letting go of old relating patterns that no longer serve us in our relationships. And Mercury's going to be processing through, what are those patterns? What is not working for me anymore? It might be as simple as the chores in a relationship, and who does what. And I need to redefine how we each do the chores in this relationship. In your old, in as Jeffrey Green would say, in the Betty Crocker Marble Man days, the woman stayed home and she cooked all the meals. Well, in today's world, the man might be the cook. My mother had 3 daughters, and all 3 daughters married husbands who do the cooking. And my mother did all the cooking. There it was, flipped around. But there's all kinds of relating patterns that, if you're in relationships on an intimate level, or you're in relationships with friendships, coworkers, whatever, there's going to be something that is coming to the surface that isn't working anymore. And this aspect is going to be more of a trigger around it. And it can bring up frustrations because we may not want to make the change and our partner does, or vice versa. And so how are we going to work through it? And this aspect will definitely throw us in upon ourselves. We must find meaning in a relationship with ourselves as much as with anyone else in this relationship, in these aspects as well. Back again to our chart, the next aspect that we are going to look at with this Mercury retrograde is Mercury makes 3 waning semi-sextiles to Saturn. Again, start with the slower moving planet, Saturn in this case. You would go all the way around the zodiac and you'd get to 330 degrees before you arrived at Mercury. So this is the waning semi-sextile, another balsamic phase here in regards to this aspect. So Mercury, waning semi-sextile Saturn, we're going to, on an ultimate level, need to accept self-responsibility in our relationships. I'm responsible for me in my relationships, in all of them. And if there are projections, if there is Libran enmeshment, neediness, expectations. We may find ourselves disappointed when somebody doesn't take on the role we want them to in relationships. We have to accept what our role is in any and all relationships. You know, this can be even into the work world. The we have a young adult in our household, our son. He's graduated from high school. He's working multiple jobs. He is a Pluto and Scorpio, and he has Mercury in Libra. He's going to have 3 Mercury returns during this retrograde cycle. But that Pluto and Scorpio generation, boy, they all want to be in charge, and he has a little bit of an issue with bosses. The employee wanting to tell the manager what to do, the employee wanting to be in control, and so he gets feedback from the managers. You're the employee. You will do what I say. I don't care if it's fair. I don't care if it's right. You're going to show up for work when I want, and you're going to do what I tell you to do at work. So we're all going to have these roles in the different various relationships that we have. And we need to understand that role, accept that role. We're going to feel frustrations around it because, again, we want to have that outer power. And Mercury retrograde is going to throw us back in upon ourself, polarity Taurus Aries. And we're going to have to go for that inner power. We're going to have to go for that inner self-reliance. And if we have a work environment where it is downright abusive in some way, then it might be for us to accept the role that it's time to quit. This is not a relationship to be in. It will also be working in the intimate relationships as well. There's something of, there's a surrender of learning how to be of service to another in a relationship without giving your power away. And that's a lot what this aspect's going to be asking of us. It's going to be asking us also to listen on deep, deep levels. Saturn's in Scorpio. It's finishing up this 2.5-year cycle through Scorpio. Mercury in Libra, the psychology of listening is Libra. So can we hear what another is saying on deep emotional levels? Again, sometimes that saying what we know someone wants to hear rather than how we really feel on those deep levels. Can you communicate your emotions as deeply as possible? And through those communications, can you take responsibility for your emotional needs as deeply as possible? This aspect will also have us surrendering to ultimate values in relationships. Ultimately, it means having a spiritualization to the relationship, having source energy, God, Goddess, Great Spirit, whatever your terminology is, having, God in the relationship, having Goddess in the relationship. And if the particular relationship isn't one where you can have the freedom to speak spiritually or metaphysically, then how do you put deeper value into the relationship? It may be possible that as Mercury is waning semi-sextile to Saturn, these waning aspects to Mars, it may be that we're recognizing relationship energy that has reached the end of the road. And with Saturn in Scorpio, it can involve career. It can involve resources. It can our relationship to certain resources. Do we need them anymore? Do we need this certain item or resource in our life anymore? Does it make us happy? So beyond just letting go of old relating patterns and perhaps the relationship as well, there's going to be a letting go of old resources that no longer serve us. And Mercury retrograde will make that recognition. And you know how Libra can sometimes, everybody wants to project balance onto Libra. Well, everybody also wants to project out there that Libra can sometimes be so wishy-washy, never makes its mind up. That's not always true. Libra can be extremes, and Libra can be very decisive choice points. And that's what this Mercury retrograde in Libra is going to be about, is making those choice points, yes and no, about these relationships, resources, situations in our life that are no longer serving us. And part of Mercury retrograde is going to be throwing off Libra wishy-washiness and making those choice points. You're welcome to interrupt me anytime, Leroy, if there's questions or anything. The next aspect we're going to look at is the fact that Mercury will make 3 conjunctions to the North Node, and it will make 3 oppositions to the South Node, while it is within orb of oppositions to Uranus as well when it is activating the nodal axis. And so here are the dates. You can see that all 3 of them are taking place right between 19 and 20 degrees Libra. That nodal axis is slowly reversing, but it is slow enough that Mercury is boom, 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 right over 19 degrees, 19, 20 degrees Libra. We're going to have to get to self-honesty here. South Node Aries, that opposition. We've got to be willing to hear the feedback that is coming towards us from others in our lives. Mercury conjunction over North Node. We're being pulled into relationships. We're being pulled into communications. We're being pulled into the giving and the sharing and the listening. And with Mercury's opposition to the South Node, it's quite possible we're going to have defensiveness towards what we're hearing from others. We may not be able to listen or hear that feedback that others are giving to us. And that's where we need to make that effort to move away from the defensiveness. Let go. Can we listen? How honest can we get with ourselves? Mercury retro in Libra is pointing towards Aries and that South Node. So there can be people from our past. There can be things from the past that can resurface during this time period. I remember I went through a time period in my late 20s and somewhere into my early 30s where I had an old boyfriend. It wasn't a long relationship, a very karmic one. And every time Mercury went retrograde, he'd show up in my life again. And every time I'd say, no, thank you. I'm not interested in a relationship. I haven't heard from the person for 20, 25 years. I don't know if he'll come in my life again. He owes me money. So I don't think he'll show up unless he wins the lottery. Even then, who knows? But so we can find that things from our past, South Node Aries, will be coming up again through this Mercury retrograde. And it will run around the themes of intimate relationships. It'll run around themes of fairness. It can themes of communications. There will be those of us who will fear we're going to lose ourselves in the partnership. That's a valid thing with Libra Aries. And it's also valid with Scorpio. When we make those deep mergings in Scorpio, there can be a loss of self. And so part of what we need to recognize is it's not losing ourself. It is being able to do that Scorpio osmosis of merging into something we were, or of merging into something that we were not before the relationship. And then Mercury retrograde pointing back to Taurus Aries, going back to a deeper level of self-identity and self-reliance from the merging. There's an ebb and flow that needs to be taking place here in the relationships. This could be another aspect that breaks a relationship off and we get thrown back in upon ourselves. Or we may be the one wanting to do the leaving and partners throwing in upon themselves. Typically, though, there is this pull towards relationship with Mercury sitting on the North Node. And there also is a very, very strong pull towards deepening communications, towards deepening our ability to listen and actually hear what another is saying. We can make some communication breakthroughs with this Mercury retrograde if we're willing to just make the effort. We won't get as much done as we'd like to get done because we're going to spend more time communicating over the next month. Be at peace with that. Be okay with that. And even when Mercury says you've got to do something multiple times. Now we're going to move into the aspects that Mercury is making to Neptune and Chiron. They're both retrograde here. These are what we call waning sesquisquadrates. If you start with Neptune and Chiron, you go all the way to Mercury, you get to 225 degrees. And we are moving from full phase to disseminating phase. So Mercury is moving from energy moving outward, full phase, yin, to energy moving inward, disseminating phase, yin. It's moving from active to passive and going back and forth with Neptune and Chiron. So that back and forth, outward, inward is going to be speaking, listening in many ways. Again, these two aspects will be somewhat similar. I did jot down some notes for each of them, but I'll talk about them a little bit together. Mercury waning sesquisquadrate Neptune. You see all these aspects again, slower moving planets, so Neptune is retrograde in Pisces, while Neptune's in Libra. This is going to be an aspect of which we're needing to learn how to love ourselves as much as another. What's going to get pointed out to us is where we've been projecting all these ideals onto others in our life, and therefore the disappointments and disillusionment that we may go through in relationships from those projections. And this isn't necessarily going to be limited to an intimate partner relationship. This can be friendships, this can be teacher-student, this can be coworkers, this can be employer-employee. This can include all relationships beyond acquaintances. So we all have a lot of different relationships in our life besides an intimate partner or spouse relationship. So where, example is a student projecting onto the teacher and projecting out there that certain things onto the teacher and being disappointed when the teacher doesn't fulfill those projections or doesn't operate in the way that they were projected upon to be. Can happen in friendships. We might expect that our friends will have the same values and um, uh, operating guidelines that we have towards them, and we could get disappointed. And what it does then, Mercury retrograde Libra back to Aries, it throws us back upon ourselves. It throws us in upon ourselves to rediscover who we are and to get real with ourselves, and therefore learn how to get real with others. It's okay to see the potential in someone. The danger is when we project that potential as how they actually operate. We will have to learn how to accept diversity in regard to others, other individuals, other groups. We'll work with this individually and collectively. Who is perfect? There are many, many paths back to universal source. And the Libra balance is allowing for the differences, the contrast between ourselves to others, and allowing for that to be as much as possible up until the point that, somebody else's behaviors become harmful or hurtful, then we have that absolute right to remove ourselves from dangerous situations or abusive situations. But we could look at the sadomasochisms coming up here with these Mercury aspects to Neptune and Chiron. And so that good old golden rule, do unto others as you wish them to do unto you, operate through that and hold the healthy boundaries here if the other doesn't operate the same way. There might be a tendency, because this is moving into disseminating phase, there might be a tendency to think that we know it all in regard to any particular relationship we are in. Mercury retrograde Scorpio. I'm going to be in control and power here. I'm going to, if you just do what I tell you to do, then the relationship will be okay. I know what's best for you in our relationship. And again, this is distortion. There's always more to learn in relationships. And there's always more to understand about someone else in a relationship. So careful of the know-it-all cap. Take it off. Throw it away. Seek to understand another so that another will understand you. Same thing, Mercury in the waning sesqui-squadrates to Chiron as well. Here's where I ran out of time for my notes. I didn't get back to this one, but it's very similar. What we will need to be careful of with Chiron here is projecting our victimization onto others, or having others project victimization onto us, claiming that we're the one hurting them. And what has to be adjusted here is fairness and equality in the giving and the receiving, that Mercury retrograde in Libra. And holding those healthy boundaries, standing up for ourselves if we're doing all the giving and learning how to say no, or learning how to give a little more in fair ways if we're on that selfish end and it's being pointed out to us. What we need to recognize through this particular aspect during Mercury's retrograde is ultimately we are each responsible for our own happiness, self-responsibility for our happiness. This Mercury retrograde will have us disappointed again to the degree that we are projecting out there another person is responsible for making us happy. It's just not how it works in natural law. If we take ultimate responsibility for our own happiness, then any and all relationships will evolve into being healthier relationships in whatever way it's necessary. The last aspect that we need to look at is Mercury's aspects to Venus. Now, as we look at the interior conjunction over here on October 16th, Mercury is close to going backwards over Venus and doing its conjunction with Venus, but it actually has two aspects. Mercury starts out 30 degrees ahead of Venus over in a waxing semi-sextile. And so what we have here is two Venus aspects one time. October 1st is the waxing semi-sextile, and then the conjunction is the day after the interior conjunction with the Sun. So we have Mercury retrograde over the Sun October 16th, and then reversing back over Venus October 17th. So that's a strong time period in that mid-October to really get the aha moments, the insights that we need of this particular Mercury retrograde. And where is fairness? Where is balance? How do I communicate? How do I, balance self with others? When we look at the planetary pair of Mercury and Venus, we're looking at the conscious mind Mercury and its values, Venus. Venus is always in aspect to Mercury during its retrograde cycles because they both have orbits within the Earth. They're closer to the Sun. And so typically there's usually one aspect, sometimes two. Mercury ahead of Venus is when Mercury is ahead of Venus, as this first aspect is, we're not taking our values into consideration. And then as Mercury retrogrades back over and comes back to Venus again, we start taking what is important to us, what do I value, what do I need, into consideration more and more. Mercury retrograde, it's pondering that. And because this Mercury retrograde is in Scorpio-Libra and Venus is traveling through its own sign, Libra, it begs this question, what is most important to me in regard to my intimate relationships? What kind of an impact do I have on others in relationships? How do others impact me? How do their values impact me? Are we at such differences that the relationship no longer functions? Has it come to a natural ending, or why in the road? Do I have the courage to step away if that's the case? Am I okay if others decide they no longer want to have a relationship with me? As I am evolving my thought patterns, my communication skills, how is this impacting my values around relationships? How is this impacting how I communicate those values to others? How are my needs and desires and values in relationships changing? Jeffrey Green used to teach that Venus relates to values, and from what we value come our needs, and from our needs come the desires we act upon. So the simple explanation of this is, for someone, there may be a strong value for the BMW or the fur coat or the next resource. For others, the value may be to have a spiritualization in a relationships. Those are very different values, material versus non-material. And you can see how that's going to then impact what your perception of your needs are, and then where your juices get active in wanting to actually create something that you desire. So this Mercury retrograde, our relationships are going to come together or fall apart, basically. They're going to evolve to the next level of meaning, or they're going to disintegrate because someone's needs are no longer being met in the relationship. And of course, each of us will be all over the spectrum in how this is taking place. And this will take place on a personal level as well as on a collective level between groups of people, societies, countries, races. All we've got to do is just look at the consensus world right now, and 11 years of war in Iraq, and we think that we can bomb our way to peace. As I said to Leroy, we'll try and do the Scorpio surge and control thing again, and the moment we walk away, we'll be back at the same spot. We didn't learn the lesson with Vietnam, so here we are learning it all over again with Afghanistan and Iraq. When will we recognize bombs don't create peace? So, a couple of ending comments, phrases for you with this Mercury retrograde cycle in Scorpio-Libra. This is about deepening our ability to listen and actually hear what another is saying and to actually be heard. This is about creating the next level of fairness in our life and others saying the same thing to us. It's about reaching new levels in our abilities to communicate in our relationships. This retrograde cycle can also bring opportunities for achieving deeper intimacy. When you have those fantastic conversations with someone, you feel closer to them. You feel that camaraderie. You feel that intimacy. In the midst of that, can we have an acceptance of the differences between ourselves and another? Can we accept the why in the road if the differences are too much? Can we agree to disagree if it's still compatible to be together with our differences? There also will be perhaps a shaking up of resources in some way with this Mercury retrograde in early Scorpio. Last year, the Mercury retrograde was entirely in Scorpio. And the year before that, 2012, the Mercury retrograde, let me get this straight, started in Sag, went back to Scorpio. So this is the third year of having a Mercury retrograde in Scorpio. This is the first year of Mercury retrograde in Libra. It'll be entirely in Libra next year, 2015. It'll be Libra Virgo 2016. So this Mercury retrograde, and here we are entering that famous Scorpio time period where we do get some resource shakeups. So it's possible that this Mercury retrograde could be the triggering with resources in some way. The revolution or the protesting in the streets that's taking place in Hong Kong is because they're wanting autonomy and their own power and control to be in charge of their own city, their own resource. And China was wanting to be more and more controlling of Hong Kong as a resource. So we'll see where this Mercury retrograde takes it over the next couple of days. And so this is the end of my materials for this Mercury retrograde. I thought I might make it a little shorter. Yeah, I thought I might be a little faster than 2 hours. Leroy teases me. How can you talk about Mercury retrograde for 2 hours, Kim Marie? Well, honey, it's Mercury, quite easily. I want to let you know that our next Mercury retrograde class I'm going. The Mercury retrogrades will be free classes. It gives everybody a taste of how I am as a teacher. And so the next Mercury retrograde is ahead of you there on the screen. Again, Mercury is going to be in air signs next year, and you can see the date of the next Mercury retrograde if you want to put it on your calendar. And one more time, I'd like to invite all of you to participate in the 7 series webinar on the 3 elements, or excuse me, the 3 modalities and 4 elements, and we'll work our way through the 12 archetypes during those 7 classes. And you can enroll now, one enrollment, and you get all participate in all 7 classes. And if you can't make it live, you get the video afterwards, you get the PDF afterwards, and you get a MP3 audio download as well. So, everybody was pretty quiet. You didn't interrupt me, Leroy. So, questions or comments from anybody?
One that did come in. Obviously, the retrograde is going to go back into Libra and get close to that opposition to the Uranus South Node conjunction. Any comments on that for one of our listeners?
Well, if you remember, it's going to be closest when it'll be close all the way from the interior conjunction all the way back to Mercury direct. All right. Let me go to a slide, okay? Because Mercury is going to go direct at 1646 Libra. So it's going to be within 3 degrees of an opposition to Uranus. Basically, sparks, communication sparks, and could be triggers, upsets, polarities, standoffs, me versus you, I know it all, you don't, defensiveness, what we have to be careful of, and hopefully this can be smoothed over a little bit, that it's Mercury direct, not Mercury retrograde, and we can get to that point of listening versus arguments. But it's quite possible it could just be the extremes of me versus you, the lack of communications, the fighting, the arguments, the standoffs, especially from collective perspectives, because so much of the consensus world operates in me versus you, patriarchal versus matriarchal principles of giving, sharing, and including. What we would want to look towards is, because Uranus is conjunct that south node, and by the way, I'll go forward again, and you'll see that in December I'm going to have a class specifically on Uranus and Pluto with the nodal axis, because in January we're going to have Uranus conjunct the south node, and 3 days later we're going to have Pluto square the nodes. So that's going to be fairly active there. But Uranus conjunct that south node is really bringing all kinds of insights to the surface about each of us and who we are and who we're not. Our self-identity, Aries, is just being uploaded all over the place. I mean, Uranus, the past, we have all kinds of old issues from the past coming up around our defensiveness and loneliness and insecurities. And we also have everything about ourselves that we've tried to suppress from the past. And we have the blueprints of the future of where we all are each trying to go. So we're all trying to metamorphose past that defensiveness of Aries into the cooperation of Libra. And that's the ultimate potential of the Mercury-Uranus opposition within orb. If, we're not triggered into our polarity extremes. So just keep trying to deepen the sense of this is who I am and this is who I'm not. Because it's going to offer you then some clarity in the communication situations that will arise for you through this Mercury retrograde. Then hopefully you're going to have achieve a better ability to communicate with others about you and your needs, and in the same regard, listen to others about them and their needs and who they are. Other comments or questions?
Thank you, Kim.
The yeah, the Uranus, Pluto, and nodal axis class is December 15th. If you want to mark that on your calendar. And again, you'll have this as a PDF so that you can refer to this list if you would like to. I have a standalone class, Jupiter retrograde in Leo, December 8th, as we approach Jupiter's annual retrograde cycle. Here are those Mercury retrograde aspects that I wanted to share with you, and there were so many of them I had to go to 2 different slides. So I'm putting this one up here. You can again print it out if you want to look at this and refer back to it as you observe the Mercury retrograde cycle. And here is the second page of the Mercury aspects. So again, when astrology doesn't take into consideration the entire cycle of aspects, we miss a lot with the Mercury retrogrades. And the semi-squares and the sesquisquadrates are just as important as squares, conjunctions, and oppositions. They are just as active. And I really wish that a lot of astrological calendars would automatically start to include these aspects. And I go through that cycle of phases and aspects, the 8 phases, and all the aspects in great detail in segment 1 of our course. We just finished up doing a class on that. And matter of fact, this is a little backwards, but our segment 1 webinar next month in October is going to be a review of the math on how to determine aspects between any 2 planets. And in evolutionary astrology, we use the cycle of aspects from 0 to 360. Is it a first quarter square or a last quarter square? Is it a waxing trine or a waning trine? There are major differences in interpretation with that. All right, any final comments or questions from anybody, Leroy?
What about a soul that would have this Mercury retrograde in opposition to a natal Chiron in Aries in the chart? A few comments on that?
Well, it'll be somewhat similar to that south node in Uranus in Aries.
Sure.
But with Chiron natally in Aries, you got to get past your defensiveness, and you've got to get past thinking you're all alone on planet Earth. Chiron is going to be the wound, and Chiron in Aries, there's going to be wounds around a sense of self. And when you move through that, the healing that takes place with that is then Chiron in Aries can be quite independent, but not from an isolation or defensiveness perspective. Then you get a strong sense of self. And then with a strong self-identity, you know how to be in balance with others, when to say yes and when to say no. I have Chiron in the first house. I have that archetype within me. And it took me a while to find my own identity, Chiron in the first house.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay, Kim, I
Mhm.
just wanted to repeat that the invitation to join us on the modality series, the elemental series. Again, it's a sequence of 7 events, all for 105 is your total enrollment. You'll also be able to get those individual webinars on our educational webinars page on the website, but not until after the events are over. So just know that the cheapest and best way to participate is to buy the entire series. And most of you that registered for this event will be seeing, and I'll invite you to take a look at your inbox. You should be getting a newsletter from us with details on how to purchase your enrollment, get your webinar registration link for the entire series if you choose to do so. And we are certainly encouraging new enrollments in our multimedia and online course here at EAN in October, as you know. And we said at the beginning of the webinar tonight, use coupon code COURSE, COURSE, upon checkout. Apply that coupon and receive $50 off any segment of our multimedia and online course and get all the benefits of becoming a registered student at EAN. So with that, Kim, I guess I'll throw it back to you for any final comments.
Hmm. Thank you, Media Monk. No, I would just again refer you to this slide right here, and that you really want to deepen your abilities to listen, create fairness, communicate. Mercury retrograde, it's not the end of the world, even though Kim Marie has felt like it has been to her life from time to time. I have Sun conjunct Mercury less than half a degree. It's a superior conjunction. I don't have Mercury retrograde, but I have Sun, Mercury, Neptune between 1 and 2 degrees Scorpio. You know what Mercury retrograde squatting on my chart. And then Mercury goes direct at 1646 Libra, and my Jupiter is 1644 Libra. This is an active Mercury retrograde, but it's not the end of the world, as I'm telling myself.
Aho.
All right, everyone, I hope that you found this most helpful, and I wish you all a very smooth, pleasant, breathing, pacing Mercury retrograde. Thanks for listening, everybody.